Warning, this video is intended for adult collectors. It contains plastic collectibles, questionable opinions, and someone who owns way too many plastic robots. It's too late. Random review is about to begin.
Before we begin, thank you very much to Phil S. for joining my Patreon campaign. Always appreciated. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you for helping to keep the channel afloat. It helps me tremendously. I know not everyone can pay into a Patreon campaign right now. That's fine. Do you? Take care of yourself first. Take care of me later, only if you can handle it. And if you can't pay up anything, that's fine too. Hit subscribe button for me. We're getting very close to 50,000, so I'd really like and appreciate that as well. Let the ads play. Whitelist me on your ad blocker. Things like that alone do a world of good. Or just hit the like button. It's very simple and free to help me out in those ways. But thank you. No matter how you help, I appreciate it. Let's talk a toy. So I'd really like to be reviewing the new Rise of the Beast mainline stuff, because I think that's the most interesting stuff that's on the way. It hasn't appeared in my area, so I have to review what I have on hand, and what I have on hand is the Warrior Class Thrash for Earthspark. Now, I think these reviews are pretty important to do, because Earthspark Deluxes are just on that ridge of like, it's the price point, you can take it or leave it, and it really depends on how good the toy is. So I feel like, because sometimes warrior classes are fantastic, and sometimes they're just like a little bit better than a play school transformer. So we're gonna actually see how this one is, and see how we go. I've had high hopes for it. So let's see if those are rewarded. For starters, yes, obviously we have him in his motorcycle with sidecar mode, which I actually really like. We have not seen a Transformer with a sidecar since Animated Prowl, and before that, you have to go all the way back to Generation 1 and the Mega Pretender, whose name I can't even remember. Vroom, I believe. Vroom. It's a really rare vehicle mode, so I'm actually glad someone in a main cartoon got to claim it and try to make it their own thing, because even Prowl, he only had the sidecar late in Animated. But here, we have a full sidecar equipped motorcycle, looking really nice. It's a great way of adding a little bit more bulk to a toy that otherwise would have very little to make a robot from. But surprisingly, it doesn't incorporate into the robot mode whatsoever. The toy itself is cast in a metallic silver plastic. There is an actual element of metal flake to it. It's subtle. There's only a very hints of swirls. Nothing deep or anything that makes me worried for the toy's future. You're also going to find some metallic element in this, it's kind of forest green color that we have going on in the lower section of the motorcycle mode. You can see, okay, so first off, there's no hiding how he transforms in this mode. Well, I will say that I find the transformation to be pretty clever for the price point. It's really pretty obvious how everything works when you look at the vehicle, especially when you start noticing the little gaps, and I don't just mean the physical gaps, but I mean the gaps in the engineering department, in the budgetary department. It's a smaller toy, it's for a kid's line, so things are going to appear, like the fact that his head is just there, hidden in the front of the motorcycle. You can pass it off as some mechanics, but you can see his nose. It's a little bit silly. Also, the arms kind of pin there to the side of the motorcycle itself instead of tucking into its form in any way, completely refusing the idea that anyone can actually straddle this motorcycle and ride it like you're supposed to. No, it's going to look like that. And that's just going to be how it is. So I assume you just kind of I guess you have to be like super wide-legged to actually, or like straddle it like you would like if you were riding like a bull. I mean I don't know. I don't know if I can compare it in any other way. It's a little bit funny, but like that aside, I don't mind the look of it too much. I mean, it's not a realistic motorcycle even if you take those things out. I think the overall shape at least looks good. Even if, yes, there's some obvious stuff going on. The sidecar I do wish was a little bit more accessible. Like actually had like a seat in there I could plop like a Titan Master into or something. But for what it is, it's fine. It's doing its job, and its job is to basically hold the motorcycle upright and add a little bit more bulk to the vehicle mode. It does glide really nicely, and this is on a glass surface. So figure that one out. Like, that's a really smooth rolling motion for a for a lesser expensive figure, and it's not even on a high friction surface. I think that's kind of impressive. I think that's a really cool little touch. So yeah, not a whole lot to it. You get a little bit of this teal color for the windscreen here and on the headlight. Little bit of green paint to match the underside. That's really all the paint you're going to get in the... Oh yeah, well, the seat obviously as well. But that's really all that you're going to get out of the vehicle mode. The robot mode is where the bulk of that paint starts shining, and we'll start getting its a little bit more obvious details there. So let's transform, and we'll see how exactly that goes. So for starters, that comes off completely, and we're going to set the sidecar aside. And to start the transformation, we're going to undo what I thought was a kickstand when I first got this toy. Nope, it's there mostly to shore up these pieces on the side, because this is how the bulk of the transformation works. So I'm going to flip those out, and we're going to unpeg from the side, rotate the legs down like so. See, all the painted areas will show you what has to face where. You're going to find the legs will click in at the knees to tell you exactly where it's supposed to be in like the fully stood robot mode. So wait, feel around for that click, that little soft little detent in order to tell you where that toy is supposed to be. Unclip the arms from the sides, and we're going to raise those up like so. All this rotates 90 degrees to point forward. That's going to fold up, and we're going to fold the front side of the motorcycle up as well. Front section folds down. All that clicks in really nicely. Make sure all these things are straightened out nice and smooth here. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much your robot mode transformation. It's pretty slender. It's pretty slick. Here, let me get the last part down. Fold that down. Make sure that clicks in. There we go. Now that's your transformation. I mean, all in all, like, it's a pretty simple transformation when you really break it down, but it's really smooth too. Like, there's something about... come on. Need a new tripod. There is something really smooth and dynamic about how the transformation works. It's not doing anything fancy, but at the same time, there's some cleverness to what it is doing. And it comes across in a really, really nice way and presents a really efficient transformation. When I saw how Thrash worked in the show, when I looked at his robot and his vehicle mode, I genuinely wondered how they were going to get such a slender robot out of that motorcycle, because it didn't look like there was a whole lot of room to work with. I thought they'd incorporate the sidecar to make up for that, but they don't. No, they've apparently figured it out long before I could, so it's actually really impressive how smooth the whole thing comes about. Let's take a quick look at the head sculpt. Oh, hey, look, he's got squared off glasses. He must be terrible, right? So, we have that same kind of forest greens is on his face. That's accurate to the show. Bright blue eyes, nice and circular there. Yep. He looks all the Terran that I would expect him to. Looking quite good. Really enjoy it. And yes, he does have his goggles painted gold with a little bit of blue there at the top themselves. Really, really nicely handled. Really like how he comes about. Alright, so we get a good look at him once the camera refocuses. The proportions on him are spot on. He is the svelte, slender dude that he is in the show. Really clean, too. Like, he's got the wheels on the back sides of his legs, but that's really nothing unfamiliar to his animation model. So, I give it a pass, and guess what? They're out of the way, and they're not hurting anything. Yeah, he cleans up really, really nicely. Like, just as a general, like, example or display of the character from the cartoon, absolutely wonderful. He does everything, I believe, as good as he can. I think he does everything pretty correctly. Looks pretty good to me. We do see some extra paint details going on. The shoulders have been completely painted in some gunmetal, like the seat, as well as a bit of silver. You can also see some silver piping going down the thighs and then some extra gold here on the hips. Gives it a little bit more flash, breaks up some of that solid colors in the midsections. Really, really nice. Really nice. Obviously, warrior class, it's not going to get a whole lot of paint, but I think the paint they managed to work into this one, it gets it in the right spots. So it actually keeps it interesting and doesn't overwhelm and doesn't feel like there's like a lot missing. Obviously, there's going to be some paint you could throw onto it if you're a customizer and make it look a little bit nicer, more show accurate. For what they're working with, I think it does a good job. All right, so before we get into articulation, let us talk about that sidecar. The sidecar does have its own transformation element as well, so we can go into that as well. The front flips out to reveal a big minigun barrel with three individual barrels on it. Go ahead and fold that down, and then we can fold this piece up too to kind of form a scope. When's the last time you saw a minigun with a scope on it? Hey, it's a transformer. We're not going to argue it. So the whole thing, now, when you fold the tire in, you're going to see that little peg on the inside, right there. Make sure that the smaller gap in the spokes goes into that peg. That holds the wheel in place nice and sturdy. That way you can actually make use of that peg without anything going weird. The peg itself has plenty of spots where it can mount. For starters, on the forearm is the obvious place. That's the traditional place for some big heavy weapon like this. He uses it as a shield in the show, so he can actually angle it like that to use as a shield as well. If you want it as a handgun, he can also use it as a handgun, or if you're just the kind to keep everything in its place, there's an extra port here on the back where you can just plug it in. It's nice and smooth connection. Doesn't really get in the way too much of his overall robot look. And yeah, he can hold up the weight of it no problem. So I think all of that makes for a pretty decent little weapon accessory. You know, it's a pretty beefy one, but it does have multiple uses, has plenty of places to go, so doesn't really get on my nerves. I think it's a really good way of using the sidecar. All right, articulation. The head does have a rotation to it, but it's limited to about 90 degrees because of the extra bulk around the head. If they did this in deluxe class, I would imagine they'd avoid this, but here it's a little bit more limited. Ball joints go in all directions. They're well cut, so they do have a good range of motion. Also, because of the transformation, you get an unintentional butterfly joint in the torso, which is a little bit more useful if you can figure out something for it. Nothing in the bicep, but the elbows are ball jointed, so they can rotate all the way around as well as bend 90 degrees. See, you get a waist rotation as well. Ball joints in the hips that work really good. Nothing getting in the way, nothing interfering with them. The knees, they do reach almost 90 degrees. Now, we did talk about them having a detent, which means there's a few subtle degrees that it is missing. So, like, there is, like, the subtle bend, and then it clicks back into that spot. So, you're missing a few, you know, you're missing, like, 10 degrees of motion here. It's not the worst thing to lose, but it will limit you a little bit if you like your more, like, subtle, like, little subtle poses, or if you're the type to like really dial in a pose and want it exactly right, that might lose you a little bit. But that, my friends, is going to be warrior class Thrash. Let's see if he can, yeah, he holds up. Yeah, I don't even have to struggle to try and get him to stand up with that big weapon in his hand, which also not only tells you how well the toy balances, but it also tells you how solid the ball joints are on this thing. So not a bad job, Hasbro. Yeah, for its price point, I think this is definitely one of the better ones. His bike mode's a little bit iffy, but it's still unique, and I still think it looks good. And yeah, his robot mode offers quite a bit. I like the weapon accessory and how much it can do. It's got a good level of articulation for a warrior class. And it's going to be a nice holdover until his eventual deluxe class figure, because he is a main character. Eventually, you know, he's going to be getting his own. It's just a matter of time there. Until then, his sister is as a deluxe, is quite a bit bigger than him. So proportions are going to be a little bit weird in this toy line because there's no Voyager class, unfortunately. I hope there is, because the show, it really feels weird to have all of the Maltobots the same height. So hopefully this line expands. So I want it to do well, so it can expand. But for now, Warrior Class Thrash. Really solid toy. If you see it, pick it up. I think this is one of the better ones.
It's the bosun's turn. He's looking at TJ's character and he's just like, what you gonna do?
Right.
I blew him a kiss.
I love him. I love him.
What's your problem? He's just gonna pull his can crossbow and just fire at you.
That's fair at this point.